Hey everybody, it's LlamaPaintsMinis here. Today I'm going to show you an example of something you can do with one of the Signature Series artist sets of paint from Kimera. This one is the Marc Masclan Skin color set. Beautiful array of colors, and you can really kind of cover the entire range of like human or humanoid skin tones with this. Because one of the things that I've learned with color theory and doing flesh tones is when you're going for a human skin tone, whether you're talking a really dark skin tone or a very pale skin tone and everything in between, you want to kind of be based in oranges. And you can take a class with a teacher and they'll tell you that in color theory as well. And this really covers the full range of that. So you see you've got everything from the very, very dark black skin tone, the pale carmine red, which is just one of my favorite colors that Kimera makes in general, but it works really well here. There's middle brown, which is a rich sort of mahogany brown. It leans a little more red than it does, say, chocolate. Pumpkin, very cleverly named, but this one's very important to sort of get the like peachy or salmon elements that you need when working your way through the skin tones. Shiny skin tone, which is a yellowish color, kind of similar to sunny skin tone if you're familiar with AK or Vallejo, only this one's a more pigment dense. And then of course ivory light, which is a warm off-white. And again, you could make most of these colors by just using the base set or expansion set 1. And just like those, these paints are very pigment rich. And so you kind of control the level of chromatic intensity yourself with dilution and with mixes. And so you can get away with that, mixing that white without losing too much saturation. And so what I'm going to do this on here is just a simple academic bust. This is the number 2 arrowhead or taperhead brush, the Kolinsky Sable one from Kimera. They have a synthetic version that's on the way soon, which is also very good. And this is just an academic bust here, which are great for practicing stuff like this. You'll see a lot of videos from me where I'm working on this very same head, because I've got a whole bunch of them, and it's great to practice stuff that I'm not quite sure if I want to put to model yet. And we've all been through that. We've all got things we want to try, but you don't want to use your expensive, pretty model that you plan to make a display piece or stand out in an army. And so something like these little printed academic busts are just great for stuff like this to practice. Now the way I set up my wet palette for Kimera paints in particular, the water's about halfway up the sponge, and I make sure the paper's nice and flat, and I give myself plenty of room. See, I'm using a massive wet palette. The Kimera wet palette is very, very large. And then I set up the drops of paint in their own little puddles, and then I pull paint from them to another spot on the palette to thin them or to do the mixing. I don't add water directly to the puddle of paint because you want to kind of preserve what they are and then do your mixing separately. And so all I'm doing here is creating sort of like an entire gradient from mid to mid dark all the way up to light, so that I can grab any part of the gradient down the road when I do refinement. And you'll see what I mean. That orangey peachy color there, that pumpkin is really, really pivotal in how you can transition from dark to light with skin tones. But you can do up more than just skin with these. I mean, these are fantastic for skin, but you can do more than that with these. You can do leathers. You can do some warm non-metallic metals that lean into like kind of a bronzy look. Hopefully, I'll get to show a video doing something like that. And as I'm working up the highlights here, you'll see I take the mixture that I make the puddle with and then start a new one. And then I typically add just a little bit of the mid-tone prior and then I go up through yellows, and whites or off-whites. And when you're working with sort of these pure or single pigment paints, you can do that. You can add a little yellow and a little white, and you don't desaturate it too much. You don't lose all of that vibrancy. And that can happen with some other paints. I mean, I remember when I began miniature painting years ago, and I only had kind of the sort of the same brands, the same pots that everybody had, dropper bottles or pots. And they're all pre-mixed, and it's great. It's convenient that you have 300 paints in a line, and you can just grab the other bottle to go up or down. But it became tricky to mix because a lot of those paints have white or black already mixed in them. And it's for stability, and it's for opacity, ease of coverage. And they have a bunch of leveling agents and mediums in them to make them flow. But when you try to add white or black to something like that, it would kind of change the way it looked, or you would mix two colors together and not get what you expected. With these, like white and black become very useful. Here I'm not using either, but that off-white is very close to white. And I can mix it confidently knowing that I'm actually just going to go up in value in a way that's true, and then I can just add in a dot of the yellow every now and then to maintain some luminosity. It's nice. See, I've got a whole range. This person will have sort of medium light skin, so I've created an entire range that I can draw from now and go back and forth. But at first, I'm not going to be so focused on refinement. It isn't about being perfect all the way up. It can help you visualize it better and understand the shapes and the way the light works on the three-dimensional volumes if you first sort of block in or frame in your values. So frame in like your shadow first. Maybe it's a mid-tone and not your darkest shadow. And then frame in your planes of light. And then you can work on refining and going up and down in either direction from there. So here I just load the brush full. I haven't diluted it a whole bunch or anything. And I'm just going to sort of block in one plane of light or shadow to his right, our left. And you can see the brush is very full. And I'm just letting the paint flow right off the tip of the brush onto the model. And on that left side here, I'm going to lean a little bit more reddish. And you'll see on the right side, I lean a little bit, just ever so slightly to that kind of purpley brown that the black skin tone has. In this particular academic bust, I was able to do that because of the shape of his hair frames in his face in a way that kind of creates two planes of light. So I'm working on more than just skin tones themselves here. I'm also working on an exercise of two different light sources without one being like, OSL or something glowing. Although you certainly could do that to suggest atmosphere around it. But I just thought I would do that because of the way the hair is angled on either side. The light would be hitting each side of his face differently, and maybe the light's coming from one direction. And again, there you can see that one side is leaning very red. And then I think the other I'll just go ahead and make it a little more pale. But you can see because of the way I prepared the paint on the palette and how much you can load this brush up, I'm able to get quite a long... let me rephrase it. I'm able to go quite a ways without having to reload the brush. And that's something I've learned more and more, is that you can load the brush pretty full so long as you maintain the sharp point and the paint is even on the brush. No lumps or blobs or bare spots. Because the paint will go on smooth, and as long as there's a little bit of moisture in the brush, you don't have to worry about it drying back near the ferrule. The paint will want to keep leaving the brush as long as there's moisture on it. As long as you're moving. And you can just drag the bristles from ferrule to point, like on your finger. You might see me do that sometimes instead of on a tissue or anything like that, because I don't want to wick away any of the moisture that's on the brush. I want it to be exactly as I mixed it on the palette. So I might just draw it along my finger to pull the moisture forward and keep the paint moving, and do that 2 or 3 times before I reload the brush. Now you can see here I've sort of picked a compromising mid-tone, or I've made a compromise, I should say. I blocked in that darker spot on our left side, a little bit paler on the upper right, and now I'm just sort of framing in a mid-tone that's really going to be a value that shows through the highlights at the end. It'll lean the whole thing just a little bit warmer than if I were mixing something mostly with the yellow or the off-white, for example. And there you can see on our right side, just by framing in the planes of light and shadow, I've already created just a little bit of a cast shadow, as though his nose is blocking, some direction of light. With some of the refining process, I usually just kind of work with stippling on skin, because skin has fine texture, pores, blemishes, hair, sometimes scarring. So it's just a way to keep some texture in there. But you can use glazing to refine, to change up values, to filter, or to smooth if you want someone with really smooth skin. And I'm just going to keep working my way up. You can see how I've already framed in the light and shadow here. And I'll just work my way right up that sort of those little puddles of paint I've made to the right. And then you go back and forth to blur the lines between your planes of light and shadow. Just keep drawing a smaller and smaller area, and then picking a tone in between the two to erase the line. I get asked a lot often how I decide to choose where my lights are, where the planes of light are, and you can do a number of things. You can prime it in a satin black and then take a photo of your miniature with a light source pointing at it the way you want the light to show, and then just keep that as a reference while you're painting, so you don't lose track of it while you're turning it around, or if you're painting at different times of day and the light's different. For me, I don't so much do that anymore. I just kind of pick how I want the light to be and then work around that. Now that was a bit of a jump there. You see me, now I'm at a spot where I'm kind of refining the eyes and touching up, but I just kept going up in value and then picked the tones in between to erase the lines is all. And again, I really wasn't doing anything in the way of glazing or wet blending, or weren't really any fancy techniques. It was just loading up the brush, using different pressures in case I wanted more coverage, or if I wanted something a little more delicate. His face comes out of focus a little bit here. I do apologize. Now there I've done the eyes using the same set, and then I do a value sketch on the hair with the black skin tone and the ivory light. Very simple. Again, you can do it all with this set. You can grab this set at Dracoya.com and use Llama and the number 10 to save 10%.